Namaskar, I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Welcome to Global Scan. In the next half an hour, big stories from across the world this week. So it is Boris Johnson all the way in United Kingdom. The decisive win for Prime Minister Johnson makes the future of Brexit much clearer now. Moving on also, the world has been watching with bated breath the developments after the catastrophic volcanic eruption on a New Zealand island. Meanwhile, anger among masses in Israel as the nation again heads to elections, and North Korea undertakes a new test. All that and more. First, the headlines. Big win for Boris Johnson in the UK elections. Remains Prime Minister. Accepting defeat, Jeremy Corbyn resigns as leader of the Labour Party. New Zealand's military forces begin high-risk operation on White Island to recover bodies of people killed in volcanic eruption this week, despite warnings that the island is still highly volatile. The leaders of Russia, Ukraine, France and Germany meet in Paris. Peace talks aimed at alleviating Ukrainian conflict. Russia and Ukraine agree to exchange prisoners. Unable to form government after two elections, Israel heads to record third election, extending deadlock. Tel Aviv residents say this is the worst thing for the country. Nobel Peace Prize 2019 awarded to Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali for his efforts to achieve peace and international cooperation, and in particular for his decisive initiative to resolve the border conflict with neighboring Eritrea. Now let's start with news from Europe. So British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Friday won a parliamentary majority in the UK's general elections, a victory that will end the uncertainty over Brexit and will help him take the UK out of European Union by the end of next month. The results showed Boris-led Conservatives won 363 of the 650 seats of the lower house of Commons. Johnson said the victory would give him the mandate to get Brexit done and take the UK out of EU next month.
It does look as though this one nation Conservative government has been given a powerful new mandate to get Brexit done. I want to thank the people of this country for turning out to vote in a December election that we didn't want to call, but which I think has turned out to be a historic election that gives us now, in this new government, the chance to respect the democratic will of the British people, to change this country for the better, and to unleash the potential of the entire people of this country. And that is what we will now do.
And Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn said he would stand down as his party faced its worst electoral defeat in 84 years, but he did not set a date for his departure and added that he would remain in charge during a period of reflection.
I want to also make it clear that I will not lead the party in any future general election campaign. I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection on this result and on the policies that the party will take going forward. And I will lead the party during that period to ensure that discussion takes place and we move on into the future.
Let's now take a look at the road ahead for Prime Minister Boris Johnson now that he continues to be the leader of UK. What are the key priorities that Boris Johnson will have to take care of? We'll now look at some of the key priorities. Deliver Brexit. Well, this election really happened because of Brexit, and Boris Johnson had said that he is the man who can deliver Brexit. Now it will be on him to ensure that the Brexit happens. Next priority, public welfare and NHS. Well, a lot of news coming out from UK has been about Brexit, but the infrastructure there, the public infrastructure needs upgradation. National health scheme also needs focus, and Boris Johnson had said that thousands of new nurses, physicians and hospitals, around 60 new hospitals will be made in the country. Boost economy. Now that is going to be a very significant part. Boris Johnson has said that Conservatives can help unleash Britain's true potential. When Brexit happens, the initial shock that will happen, a lot of investment would be required for UK to stand up again as an economic part. So that will be important. Moving on, manage the crime and justice system. There was a ongoing grievance that there is a deficit of police officers and forces in the UK, and Johnson had promised that there will be an upgradation, around 20,000 new officers in the police force in the UK. So that is going to be the focus as well for the new Prime Minister as he goes ahead. Meet climate change goals. Well, COP25 it's happened in Madrid. A lot of new goals were set up. UK will also have to meet its deadline for 2050 and later. Manage immigration. Again, vis-a-vis Brexit, the complexities would begin after the Brexit happens. Immigration, especially for EU, non-EU, Boris Johnson had made it clear that they will remain the same in the eyes of the new government. Integrity of UK, a crucial point as well. Now, the election results that have come, it shows that the Scotland National Party, SNF, has got great support from Scotland. It sort of hints at how the possible referendum for Scotland could also happen in his new tenure, in Boris Johnson's new tenure. So this integrity of the nation itself is going to be a challenge for the citizen of the UK. The UN General Assembly passed a resolution condemning the Russian occupation of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol and urged the withdrawal of its military forces without delay, seize Ukrainian military industry enterprises and the conscription of Crimean residents into the Russian armed forces. Meanwhile, the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, France and Germany met on December 9th for the peace talks aimed at alleviating the Ukrainian conflict during a summit in Paris. Russia's Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in their first face-to-face meeting, took part in 9 hours of talks in Paris, brokered by the French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The conflict in eastern Ukraine that broke out in 2014 has killed more than 13,000 people, left a large swath of Ukraine de facto controlled by Moscow-backed separatists, and aggravated the deepest East-West rift since the Cold War. The leaders of Russia and Ukraine agreed to exchange all remaining prisoners from the conflict in East Ukraine by the end of the year, but left thorny questions about the region's status for future talks. Finland has got a new Prime Minister. 34-year-old Social Democrat Sanna Marin is the world's youngest serving Prime Minister now. Finland's parliament approved the nomination on Tuesday. Out of the parliament's 200 members, 99 voted in favour and 70 against Marin's nomination as the Nordic country's new Prime Minister. 30 deputies were absent from the vote. Finland's government resigned last week after Centre Party said it has lost confidence in Social Democrat Prime Minister Antti Rinne over his handling of the postal strike. Marin has had a swift rise in Finnish politics since becoming head of the city council of her industrial hometown of Tampere at the age of 27. News now from the Americas. The Democrats in U.S. House of Representatives moved closer on December 11 to impeaching Donald Trump as a key House committee began debating the formal articles of impeachment that are expected to be brought to the House floor next week. The House Judiciary Committee was meeting to consider the 2 articles which accuse Trump of abusing his power by trying to force Ukraine to investigate political rival Joe Biden and of obstructing Congress when lawmakers tried to look into the matter.
If the president can first abuse his power and then stonewall all congressional requests for information, Congress cannot fulfill its duty to act as a check and balance against the executive, and the president becomes a dictator.
But the committee's top Republican, Doug Collins, accused Democrats of being predisposed towards impeachment and argued that the evidence did not support it.
The real legacy of this impeachment hearing will not be the removal of Donald Trump as president. In fact, if anything, they see the majority for what they are, on a 3-year vendetta to get someone that they couldn't beat, and they're desperate to do it before he beats them again next year. Here's the real damage. It's the institutional damage to this body.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump blasted House Democrats for unveiling articles of impeachment against him, which he called impeachment light.
You saw their so-called articles of impeachment today? People are saying they're not even a crime. What happened? All of these horrible things, remember? Bribery and this and that. Where are they? They send these 2 things, they're not even a crime. This is the lightest, weakest impeachment. You know, our country's had actually many impeachments. You call judges and lots of many impeachments. But it was on today, everybody said, this is impeachment light.
The Pentagon announced it was halting operational training of all Saudi Arabian military personnel in the United States until further notice after a Saudi Air Force lieutenant shot and killed 3 people last week at a base in Florida. The Pentagon later confirmed about aviation students and added that the move also would affect infantry personnel and all other Saudi trainees other than classroom training, such as coursework, which includes English language classes, which will continue. The decision will have far-reaching impact on the visiting Saudi personnel, including grounding more than 300 Saudi Arabian military aviation students as part of a safety stand-down. Top officials from Canada, Mexico and United States signed a fresh overhaul of quarter-century-old trade pact on December 10th. The pact aims to improve enforcement of worker rights and hold down prices for biologic drugs by eliminating patent provision.
We in the United States have a stake in Mexico being richer. It's important for us that Mexico succeed.
This is a progressive trade agreement that will be profoundly beneficial for our economy, for Canadian families, and for the middle class. When we began the work of updating NAFTA, we kept our focus on what really matters. The new agreement would need to preserve jobs, foster growth, expand the middle class, and support people working hard to join the middle class. We, together, have accomplished all of that.
The US-Mexico-Canada agreement was signed more than a year ago to replace NAFTA, but Democrats controlling the US House of Representatives insisted on major changes to labor and environmental enforcement before bringing it to a vote. Let's now look at updates from Asia-Pacific. The increasing tremors on volcanic island in New Zealand on December 11th prevented the recovery of bodies of 8 people thought to be left on the island. Days after an eruption engulfed dozens of tourists in steam and hot ash, 8 people were killed in Monday's explosion at White Island, which lies some 50 kilometers off the mainland, with another 9 missing and dozens injured. Authorities monitoring the uninhabited island said conditions were worsening and there was now 40 to 60% chance of a massive eruption similar to Monday, making the risk for teams tasked with recovering bodies too high. Meanwhile, health officials said some of the survivors suffering from extreme burns will undergo a skin graft surgical process that may last several months, and an additional 1.2 million square centimeters of skin is expected to be shipped in from the United States for the surgeries. Rohingya Muslims living as refugees in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, accused Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi of lying to the International Court of Justice on December 11th while watching her speak in The Hague live on television. Suu Kyi rejected the accusations of genocide and said military-led clearance operation in Western Rakhine State, launched in August 2017, was a counter-terrorism response to coordinated Rohingya militant attacks against dozens of police stations. Gambia is seeking so-called provisional measures requesting an immediate intervention by the court to halt any ongoing violations of the international human rights until the case can be heard in full. Gambia has argued it is every country's duty under the convention to prevent a genocide from taking place or to punish those responsible. More than 730,000 Rohingyas fled Myanmar to Bangladesh after the military there launched its crackdown. United Nations investigators have said 10,000 people may have been killed. Israelis on December 12th voiced anger and frustration over the country's political crisis after the parliament was dissolved, paving the way for a third round of election in less than a year. Israel will hold an election on March 2nd. Parliament decided early Thursday after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his main rival, ex-General Benny Gantz, failed to parlay the previous 2 ballots into a new coalition government. By a vote of 94 in favour to none, opposed lawmakers approved a motion dissolving Parliament and setting the new election date. It came hours after the final deadline passed to form a government following the last election in September.
I think this is the worst thing for Israel right now. We are in a bad situation economically by means of our foreign relations, by means of our health system. And the only thing we need now is a stable government that will handle these issues.
The next election, however, will be held in the shadow of a corruption indictment handed down against Netanyahu last month. Denying any wrongdoing, Netanyahu, 70 years old, has accused legal authorities of attempting a coup aimed at ousting a popular four-term leader. Critics allege that Netanyahu was trying to undermine the rule of law and set an election campaign theme, portraying himself as the victim of deep state conspiracy. As Prime Minister, Netanyahu is under no legal obligation to resign as a result of the indictment, and while in office, he can ask the legislature to grant him immunity from prosecution. As a caretaker premier, Netanyahu would remain in the post until a new government is formed, a process that could stretch months past the March election if what is likely to be a torturous new round of coalition building is taken into account. North Korea has carried out a very important test at the Sohae satellite launch site, according to the state media KCNA, on December 8th, a rocket testing ground that the US officials once said North Korea had promised to shut down. The reported test comes as a year-end deadline North Korea has imposed, nears warning it could take a new path amid the stalled denuclearization talks with the United States. Tensions have risen ahead of a year-end deadline set by North Korea, which has called on the United States to change its policy on insisting on Pyongyang's unilateral denuclearization and demanded relief from the punishing sanctions. Moving now to news from Africa. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was presented with the Nobel Peace Prize on December 10th after winning the accolade in October for his peacemaking efforts with Eritrea.
Taking a strong stance against corruption and bribery in the public. Norwegian Nobel Committee, that your previous achievements, coupled with the added encouragement, increasingly able to travel and reunite. Border disputes have been settled. Ethiopia is the cradle of humankind. The first Homo sapiens emigrated from the territory of your country. In this sense, we are all Ethiopians.
In a speech delivered at the Oslo City Hall before dignitaries including Norway's King Harald, Abiy praised the goodwill of Eritrean President and described the two countries' commitment to peace as ironclad. But Abiy, who at 43 is Africa's youngest political leader, also spoke of dangers facing his region. Since taking power in 2018, Abiy has implemented sweeping political reforms that won him praise, but also lifted the lid on long repressed tensions between Ethiopia's many ethnic groups. He said his administration had released all political prisoners, shut detention facilities, and also stopped the jailing of journalists. Critics of Abiy say his attempts to impose unity, including forming a single national political party, are doomed, given that Ethiopia's 105 million citizens belong to more than 80 ethnic groups. 86 people were killed during protest in October against the treatment of a prominent activist, while 409 people were detained over the unrest. And here's a quick roundup of important stories from across the world in Speed News.
Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Municipalities and Rural Affairs has relaxed restrictions on restaurant-going men and women. As part of the relaxation, restaurants in Saudi Arabia will no longer need to maintain entrances segregated by gender. Women will also not need to sit behind partitions at restaurants. Previously, Saudi Arabia required all restaurants to have one entrance for families and women and another for men on their own. Malaysia has reported its first polio case since 1992. The case was reported after a 3-month-old boy from Borneo Island was diagnosed with polio. The resurgence of the disease comes just months after the Philippines reported a polio outbreak in September, its first cases in more than 2 decades. Malaysia was declared polio-free in the year 2000 after reporting its last known case in 1992. Malaysia's health ministry has said it will run a vaccination drive in the rural town of Borneo Island. A devastating measles outbreak continued to spread in Samoa as the death toll from the epidemic climbed to 70, including 61 aged 4 or under. Official figures showed there were 112 new cases despite a massive immunization drive last week that saw the entire Pacific nation shut down for 2 days. Amid all this, Samoa's health ministry has said that nearly 90% of eligible people have been vaccinated against measles as it lifted the 2-day curfew. In the Czech Republic, around 6 people were killed on Tuesday when a gunman opened fire in an outpatient clinic of the University Hospital Eastern city of Ostrava. According to the police, the shooter fled the hospital after the attack, prompting a manhunt involving hundreds of officers. He later shot himself fatally in the head. The shooter died about half an hour later after the police failed to resuscitate him. The police also said that it was unclear what motivated the shooting. In the US, 6 people, including 1 police officer, were killed in a shootout in Jersey City. The shooting broke out in a residential neighborhood, and officials believe 2 suspects were killed in a gunfight. In Australia, Sydney's golden beaches turned black after ash from nearby bushfires fell along its coastline. Authorities said that heat wave in the coming days could reach 40 degrees Celsius, threatening the spread of the fire and new blazes. The most recent blaze north of Sydney, burning across 335,000 hectares of land, has caused the cancellation of many outdoor weekend activities as smoke and ash have lingered over the city. Thousands took to the streets in the western French city of Nantes as part of a nationwide protest against the government's proposed pension reform plan. The Nantes march saw some minor scuffles between police and protesters as the police deployed tear gas to disperse demonstrators. The protests hit the train services hard, and many found it difficult to commute across the city. A series of protests against climate change rocked various cities in the world this week. Around 2,400 people formed a human chain in central Brussels to draw attention to the need for urgent joint action against climate change. The protesters encircled the Belgian Federal Parliament and the Royal Palace. Climate change protests gained momentum in London as well, as thousands blocked roads leading to London's Heathrow Airport to protest against plans to build a new runway. Dozens of climate change protesters marched to central Madrid, demanding protection for the oceans while carrying a big handmade whale skeleton. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
And time now for all the action from the world of sports. Now, ahead of 2020 Olympics, World Anti-Doping Agency or WADA banned Russian athletes for 4 years from participating in Olympics and other world championships. However, athletes who can prove no hand in doping scandal will be able to compete under a neutral flag. WADA's executive committee took the decision at a meeting in Lausanne after it concluded that Moscow had tampered with lab data by planting fake evidence and deleting files linked to positive doping tests that could have helped identify the drug cheats. Meanwhile, Russian Sports Minister Pavel Kolobakov said they will appeal against WADA's ruling. Russia's anti-doping agency, or RUSA, will have 3 weeks to appeal against the WADA's decision. The Court of Arbitration for Sports would be responsible for hearing the appeal. The 13th South Asian Games concluded in Nepal on Tuesday, with India winning the highest number of medals, setting a new world record. India topped the tally with 312 medals in its kitty, comprising 174 gold, 93 silver and 45 bronze. During 10-day-long event, over 2,700 athletes from India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Pakistan and Maldives competed for over 1,100 medals. Sporting events in 26 games were held at Kathmandu, Pokhara and Janakpur. Deputy Prime Minister of Nepal, Ishwar Pokhral, attended the closing ceremony as a chief guest. Kento Momota of Japan and Huang Yaqiong of China were on Monday awarded as Players of the Year by Badminton World Federation. 25 years old, Kento Momota won 10 titles in 2019, including the World and Asian Championship, and became the first Japanese man to win the prestigious All England crown. On the other hand, China's Huang Yaqiong, also 25 years old, picked up the Women's Award for the second successive year after winning the World Doubles Championship. It's time for updates from the world of cinema and entertainment.
The new Miss Universe is South Africa.
Zozibini Tunzi, a South African activist, is now the Miss Universe 2019. Zozibini Tunzi has been crowned the Miss Universe pageant for this year. She is also the first black woman to have won the title in 8 long years. It was a dream come true moment for the 26-year-old when her answer on what young girls today should be taught won the heart of the jury. She answered leadership, saying it's something that has been lacking in young girls and women for a very long time. She competed against more than 90 women from around the world to get the title.
It's such an incredible thing for a young girl like myself who grew up in a village in South Africa to have been able to come and compete here. Winning it is absolutely mind-blowing, not just for me, but for everyone back at home, because you never imagine these things to happen, to any of us.
With nominations for various categories already been announced, the 77th edition of the annual Golden Globes Awards is all set to take place in January 2020. Actors Tim Allen, Dakota Fanning and Susan Kelly Watson announced the 2020 nominees for Golden Globe Awards.
What I love about Nicole, she is a mother who plays, really plays.
With 6 nominations, Netflix divorce drama Marriage Story ruled the nominations list, followed by the gangster drama The Irishman and Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Starring Scarlett Johansson, the film was also premiered at the Venice Film Festival.
She's brave.
He's brilliant. He's very competitive.
Everyone, Bonnie made a friend in class.
Oh, she's already making friends.
No, she literally made a new friend. I want you to meet Forky.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Disney proved its dominance in the animation category, earning 3 of the 5 nomination slots for Toy Story 4, Frozen 2 and The Lion King. Hollywood is coming out with another superhero flick. This time with Wonder Woman 1984, the makers are ready to delight action fans. The trailer of the movie has already been dropped and the movie will hit the silver screen on 5th June next year. Global Scan Desk, TD India.
Cambodia's 23rd annual Kite Festival kicked off with 107 participants from 23 provinces and cities participating in the annual event. Kites of all colors and sizes ruled the skies over Kokon province in Cambodia. We leave you with these colorful kites till we meet again next week. Goodbye for now.